Hello, and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technology, and ideas shaping a sustainable and profitable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemuller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and today we're going to be talking to the founder of a company called Ag Defender. Scott Klososky is not only the founder of Ag Defenders, but also the founding partner at Future Point of View, LLC. He's been a very successful digital entrepreneur with multiple large exits. Now, you're probably asking, why are we talking to a digital entrepreneur on an agricultural episode? Scott understands the importance of cybersecurity, and that's what we're going to be talking about today on this episode of the AgCulture Podcast. Scott's going to walk us through some of the pitfalls that he sees on a regular basis in business and in agriculture, dealing with the issue of cybersecurity. Now, I know this might not be everyone's favorite topic to listen to, but I do believe this episode is a very important one for everyone to listen to. There are many tips that he gives to safeguard yourselves and your businesses from cyber attacks in the future. So listen up and take some notes on this episode with Scott Klososky. Well, today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite topic, cybersecurity, right? And especially in agriculture. But today I'm bringing on an expert in this field, Scott Klososky, who is the founder of a company called Ag Defender. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Hopefully we can help some people with their favorite topic.
Well, I said this before we started. I haven't found a person that really understood this topic well until now, and I'm really excited to actually bring this up. I think it's very important, even if it isn't everybody's favorite topic or front of mind for most farmers and agribusiness owners. It's still a very important topic, so I'm really glad to have you on the episode today to bring this up. But before we get started into cybersecurity, give us a little background on yourself. You've been in technology for a long time and have started several businesses. Give us a little background on what that looks like.
Wow, I have. I've been in technology for over 40 years. I was one of those people who didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to teach myself how to program, and so I'm self-taught as a technologist back in the early 80s. And then pretty quickly, I really wanted to just start building my own company. And so I have built and sold a handful of software companies over the years. And probably about 18 years ago, really started to get into cybersecurity quite a bit. And so that's kind of been a piece of what I've done. But about 20 years ago, my wife and I started a consulting firm called Future Point of View. And we do a lot of digital strategy work around the country. And we did a lot of work in the ag space. And I think part of that was probably because we were headquartered in Oklahoma, and I had a ranch and raised horses and borrowed money from the farm credit system. And so when people in ag found out, wow, here's this guy who's, pretty advanced technology person, but oh my gosh, he lives in Oklahoma and raises horses. I was a little bit of a anomaly, I guess. And so anyway, just, over the last probably decade, 12 years, we started doing a lot of work in the ag space. And that was everything from helping, John Deere solve kind of big aftermarket problems with data, to helping big ag lenders, solve automation issues and things like that, to helping farming operations just figure out how to get off spreadsheets, and move to something other than spreadsheets. And so our firms worked in that field for a long time. And like I said, along the way, because we have a cybersecurity and fraud practice, we would get calls, from folks in the ag space from time to time. And so, that's a bit of the background. The Ag Defender is a whole nother story, about why we started it, how we started it. But, for those of you listening or watching, Ag Defender it's a industry cooperative. So if you think about a cooperative like a potato cooperative, right, or a walnut cooperative, this is a cybersecurity cooperative. So it is an organization that has been built from the ground up, funded by ag companies to help the whole industry. So a farming operation, a lender, a machine equipment dealer, anyone in the industry, cooperative, to help everybody improve their security posture and to be more aware of what's coming next and to lower their costs. Just to act as a buying group to help lower the cost of security. So I'll stop there because we shouldn't go on and on about background. But just know, I know the space, I know the ag space well. Obviously, we've been in security for a long time and very interested in helping people be safer.
Well, it's such a critical thing, and it's getting more so. Most of my audience knows that I'm very into technology. I have a lot of different systems that we run on our farm, from feeding software to having our whole farm under a network system. So do you want to describe some of the issues that you've seen, why having a security system or why understanding cybersecurity is so important on farms?
The vocabulary is a bit of a problem when we say cyber, because the question you could have asked was, can you define what cyber, is?
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
Right, because fraud, when, there are farmers that are being, having money stolen out of their bank accounts, and people will call that fraud. It's a digital event, right? Because they stole the money somehow using digital tools or a digital scheme. So, I think for everybody listening, when we say cybersecurity, we mean any crime that is done that involves some piece of technology to hurt you or hurt your operation. And that way we can include fraud, and we can include somebody breaking into your systems, stealing your customer data, stealing your credit card information, and we can include all of that.
Let's delve a little bit more into each one of those areas. As farms get more Internet of Things type tools with different hardware pieces on your tractor or hardware pieces on our cattle in our barns, we gather so much more data. And a lot of people don't think on farms that data is valuable to the point where somebody would want to steal that, right? They might think, well, somebody would want to attack my bank account, but not necessarily attack my data bank that I have on my farm. But do you want to go into a little bit, maybe starting there, how important data is and some of the ways that it could be using, some of the ways that farmers could be taken advantage of with that data?
So you're a dairy farmer. How many cattle do you have? How many cows?
So we milk 250 cows.
So I don't think that a criminal really cares to get the data that you have gathered on the 250 cows. Right, how much milk they're producing, or how old is the cow? What are you feeding them? I don't think they really care about that. What they care about is, what is it that you would write them a check for, or theoretically, right? What would you pay them for? So stealing that kind of data is not, if they stole it, you would say, I could care less if you know that. So there's two things they're very interested in. One would be, well, do you have credit card data, as an example? Do you have bank account data? So are you holding any data from customers or employees that if they were to steal that, and say to you, well, we have, we found a spreadsheet that had a bunch of bank account data on your employees. And we're going to go ahead and put this online on the dark web or sell access to their bank accounts unless you pay us. Now, you might say, well, it's going to be cheaper for me to pay all my employees to get new accounts, right? But they're looking for what I would call toxic data. And if you happen to have any toxic data, and again, a lot of times farmers don't even understand, hey, I have a spreadsheet that has every employee that's worked for us for the last 20 years. And so I have social security numbers on every employee for 20 years sitting in a spreadsheet. Well, if I'm a criminal, that's not a bad spreadsheet to get a hold of. Because I can either use those Social Security numbers to, hurt your ex-employees or your current employees, or I can hold that spreadsheet hostage and make you pay me, to not use the data. So you have to think in terms of, is there any chance you have any toxic data that you would not want somebody else to have? And like I said, that has nothing to do with your cows. You don't care about that data, but there may be other data. So that's one thing that a threat actor wants. The other thing that a threat actor wants is to disrupt your technology. So you said, let's say I have a dairy management system. I have a network. I've got devices on my cattle so I can pull data off the cows. And that makes you very efficient, right? It helps you run your operation. So one of the things they want to do is shut that all down. So they want to get into your network, shut it down, make you pay them to allow you to come back up. So those are the two things they want. Either they want to explore your network or explore your systems and try to find something they can hurt you with. Either directly, like they found your bank account information, right? Or they found data that you would pay money to not have them, use. So it's either that, or like I said, they get into your systems and are able to shut them down, and you'll pay to let them come back up.
We actually have an example of that happening in our state for one of the milking robot companies in our area. They got hacked, and I think there were 3 or 4 farms that basically couldn't milk cows for a good portion of a day with their milking robots because the system was hacked and the robots wouldn't operate. So caused a lot of issues.
I mean, if you have a rotary milker and you got 2,000 cows, right, that you're running through there, and they take over that rotary milker and shut it down, and then they tell you you're going to have to send us $5,000, right, in cryptocurrency to turn it back on. If you're an operation that size, losing that much money and causing that much havoc, you're gonna send them over $5,000 in cryptocurrency to get your rotary milker back.
Now, how are people getting into these systems? What are the avenues that you've seen used over the years for that?
Let's take the number one most likely scenario is they harvest credentials from somebody. You have 5 workers that have logins to that system, and they send a fake password reset email, and one of your people falls for it. And so they reset their password, but it's actually a threat actor's email. And so when you reset it, your employee puts in what their new password is and what their old one was, right? Well, they just take that old password, which is still the current password, right? And they get into the system. And then they either figure out how to shut it down directly, or they figure out how to now get into the system and take it over. So the number one way is through what you would call the human firewall, through your team members or you, right, who click on something and do something that you shouldn't do. And they're getting better and better at that because they have AI tools now that can help target you in a much better way. It can send you email after email every single day until you fall for one of them. So that's the number one way. The number 2 way would be they are scanning your network looking for weaknesses, right? Known weaknesses. So you had somebody come out, put in the network. It was 3-4 years ago. No one's updated it. No one's patched it, right? And so the threat actors they have software that is just going out all over the internet looking for anybody's networks that are weak. And when they see that your network has a weakness, they exploit it. So those are the top 2 ways somebody could get into a network. Now, one you always have to be aware of is an ex-employee. Sometimes you have an ex-employee, somebody that worked for you, and they had credentials into your system. They leave, and you never turned the credentials off. You get into a dispute with that team member. That team member comes back in and causes havoc in your system because you never turned off their credentials. So we have that kind of thing happening as well.
And what are the best ways to safeguard yourself against those instances?
Well, in the first one, it's a lot of training of your team member. It's doing phishing testing, right? What we call phishing testing, where there's some inexpensive tools that you can license that will send out fake emails to your employees to just see if you can get them to click on those emails. Right, and that's a training method to train them not to click on things that the threat actors send to them. And so that's, one of the most popular things that you do is you just do phishing testing. And if they click on something they're not supposed to, that piece of software immediately might send them an email saying, look, you clicked on something you shouldn't have. Click here to watch the training video. And then they have to watch the training video. So that's what you do to help get your employees up to speed. The other thing you do is you make your employees change their password, every 3 to 6 months. Don't let them sit with the same password forever. Just that people get sloppy about, I use the same password and it's my dog's name, and I use it everywhere and I've been using it for, 10 years. So, a lot of times you just have to kind of force password resets on your employees so that they're using better passwords and not using the same one all the time. So that's what you would do there. On the network, the second thing we talked about, it's important to have an IT person or an outsourced company who is looking at your network every year, making sure that it's updated, that all the updates, what they would call patches, have all been applied. And so you're not using a router that was installed 5 years ago and no one's updated that router. And the router's got known issues, right? So you just have to keep your infrastructure, whatever your technology is, I don't care if it's a laptop, you've got to keep it updated, or else whatever the known weaknesses are, threat actors will try to troll around the internet and find you.
Going back to passwords, one thing I've always wondered about is you see some of these different software programs online where you have one main password and it protects all your other passwords on all your websites. What are your thoughts around those type of technologies or products?
They're pretty good. I mean, password lockers, are pretty good. They help a lot. Your only danger with a password locker is if that password company gets breached, right? Like 1Pass, right? If you're using 1Pass and it's holding all your passwords, if it gets breached, that can be a problem. It's not a huge risk, but it's a risk. And so, it's certainly better than what most people do, which is, if they got a piece of paper on their desk with their passwords written on it, right? Or something like that.
Right. And who likes changing passwords every 3 months when you're notified of that on the 20 different websites that you use every day, right?
Yeah, I mean, people, it gets hard because you want to just use the same one over and over again because that's easy. But the problem is everyone's passwords eventually usually get made public because somebody gets breached and then all your passwords are put on the dark web. So there are different methods where you can use a different password every time, and it isn't hard. I'll give you an example. I have some base passwords, right? Like, let's say I have a password that's armadillo, capital A, right? So what I can do is if I am getting a new account with Cox, for something, I might do armadillo, ! CO, right, for Cox. So I might use the same base word. I might use symbols inside of that word, do it over and over again. But every new site, I add a 2-letter code to the end of it that is just the initials of whatever that tool is. Right? So, I mean, there's some tricks like that you still can use the same base password. And then if you just use a two-letter code after it, even if you forgot the password, you would go, well, I mean, normally I use capital A armadillo, ! And then 2 letters. And if it's Facebook, my guess is I used FB, right? And so even if you've forgotten it, can't find it anywhere, that's a pretty good guess, right? What your unique password was for that site. So anyway, there's some tricks you can do that you can have a different password for every site. If they force a change on you, maybe what I change is instead of an exclamation point, I turn it to a question mark, right? Again, so that if I forget or I don't have it stored in a password locker or something like that, I got a reasonable chance I could figure it out.
No, those are definitely some good tips for that. That I always hate getting that warning email on those websites. Hey, it's time to change your password. So those are some very good tips for that.
Yeah, and by the way, just what I've learned is change the base every year or two. Right, so just whatever your base password
Don't leave it the same for 10 years.
Yeah, just change the base every 2 or 3 years. So I still have passwords that's the same base from 10 years ago, right? And so it's the same base password with the same 2-digit code, let's say for Facebook, which I've had for a long time. And when they force an update, sometimes what I'll do then is change the base word. Still use the 2-letter FB, but I might change the base. But again, it's just, there are tricks like this where you always do have unique passwords, but if you don't use a locker, if you forget what you did, if you lost the document you wrote them in, you still can kind of figure it's probably this one or this one or this one.
So most people in rural America would think, cyber attackers aren't really going to be after me. They're going to be after big companies, people in cities, right?
Yeah.
But what was the real inflection point that you've seen kind of a big uptick in rural economies getting sought after by cyber attackers?
Well, that's a great question. I'll tell you a few inflection points. I think one of the first inflection points was when the threat actors started automating what they were doing. When they started automating probing networks, then they would get a list every day of organizations, and so, they could look at it and say, well, when I used to have to do this all by hand, I would go after big fish because if I could break into a big fish, they might, give me 250,000. Right. But when they started automating emails to try to see who would click on things or automating breaking into networks, now medium size and smaller ones are like, I got a list sitting in front of me. I'm a hacker. I want to get paid. Right. If I can just reach out to your farming operation and I know I could get $20,000 from you, that's not a bad payday. I got zero cost in that except my labor, right? So not a bad payday. So when they automated their attacks, they started moving downstream. Then the next thing that was an inflection point was just the quality of security. So, think about it. If you're a threat actor, maybe going after John Deere, I could get more money or Case, right, or some big company. But how much better is their security?
They have a whole team, I'm sure.
Exactly. I could work for weeks and weeks and weeks and never get anything out of them. I could go after a co-op, right? And the co-op is trafficking a lot of money, actually, and has no security. None. Right? Great. So I'll go hit a dairy co-op, right? I know some dairy co-ops up in Wisconsin and so forth. There's pretty big dairy co-ops in some places. So that co-op's trafficking a lot of money, has a ton of data, some of it toxic, and literally, you're right, no security at all. So that's when you really start to see the threat actors. Some still are big game hunting, right? But a lot of them are mid-tier, like they're hitting mid-size organizations, which is a sweet spot sometimes of not very good security, but they got enough money they can, they'll pay.
Looking forward, we talked about some pretty simple things that they're after and that have been going on for a while in this cybersecurity realm. What are some of the things that you see coming on in the near future that really keep you up at night?
Clearly, it's AI tools. It's the quality of the AI tools that the threat actors are getting a hold of. It is being able to deep fake a video, right? Or steal a voice, copy somebody's voice. So the AI tools are getting so good now that, it used to be somebody sent an email and it had misspellings in it, and maybe the logo wasn't right. And you got to look at it and go, yeah, I think there's something fishy about this. Well, today, somebody could deep fake your face, right? And could Zoom call with your face and could say, hey, why don't you wire some money to me and I'll do such and such for you, right? And I'm like, okay, what's your bank account number? The AI tools are becoming really strong weapons for threat actors. And so that keeps me awake at night. And then the other thing is employees, right? The employees that can cause threat actors to get into our systems. There's still so many of them that don't understand cybersecurity, that just don't think the world's a bad place. They trust everybody, and, especially in the ag space, like we want to think the best of everybody. And so sometimes it's just hard intellectually for somebody in the ag space to realize, no, there's people in the US and people overseas. You're just data and a number to them. They don't care who you are. They just want your money. And if they can get anything of value from you digitally, then they're going to ransom it and get money. And it's hard sometimes for employees or people to understand that there are folks doing that. My father-in-law, he lives way out in the country in Oklahoma. And I think my father-in-law, he's passed away just lately, but I think he's a reasonably intelligent guy, right? He calls one day, Scott, I think I got scammed. I got an email from what I thought was one of my friends, and asked if I would go buy a bunch of iTunes cards to help him out. And I went and bought a bunch of iTunes cards, and then he asked me to send all the numbers over to him. So I emailed all the numbers over to him. And now I can't get a hold of him. The other day, I just happened to see him. He said he has no idea what I'm talking about. So either he's got dementia, or I just sent all that money on those cards to some stranger. And sure enough, he got scammed out of, hundreds of dollars, $800, $900, which is a lot of money to him, just because he doesn't understand. When you get an email from somebody who's posing as a friend asking you to send something that's financially valuable over email, that maybe you should check on that. And I know my father-in-law is a good guy, fairly smart guy, but he just trusts too many people.
Yeah, it's just kind of in our nature, especially in agriculture, as you said, to trust others. So it's very, very prevalent in agriculture.
Yeah, so those are probably the two biggest things, is just the people issues keep me awake at night.
How do we combat the deep fake stuff? You have any ideas for that yet?
Sure. First of all, what people are doing is they will not, for instance, wire money. Like, nobody will wire money without a second person approving that wire.
Okay.
Right. So they're putting policies in place that we won't wire money. Or if anybody makes a change to a ACH or wiring address, so like any vendor, like you're working with a supplier, and you get an email from supposedly your supplier who says, hey, we've changed bank account numbers, please update your records. Right? It's having policies in place that, hey, we don't do that unless we go see them in person and ask them, did you send this email? Because if I change that account number, my money's going to a different place now. Right? So, one of the things we have to do is just, with deepfakes, you have to be more skeptical of what you're reading or seeing or hearing if they're asking you to take an action. Again, if somebody deepfaked your face and just wanted to do a podcast with me, okay, I'm out 30 minutes, okay? But if somebody with your face said, hey, I know you like raw milk, go ahead and wire me some money and I'll supply raw milk to you. It'll show up in a bottle on your doorstep every day. It's going to be fantastic, right? If I'm like, okay, great. And then you say to me, hey, give me your credit card number. And I don't think in my head, wait a minute, how do I know this is you?
Right.
Yeah, it looks like you, it sounds like you, but why would I give you my credit card number over the wire? Like I need to check something else to make sure I can trust what you're asking me to do before I hand that credit card number over. So that's going to be our best defense is you have to be careful of what you hear, what you see, what you read before you make a step, do a transaction that has money involved.
Any other last words of advice for farmers, for agribusiness owners out there in the rural countryside that you feel we need to understand to be protected?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say go to agdefender.com, right? I mean, go to agdefender.com. If you have no security and you really want some help and you don't know where to go to agdefender.com. Outside of that, I would just say, look, be aware this isn't going to get any better. Right? I mean, this isn't going to magically the criminals are going to stop doing what they're doing. They're making a lot of money. They're very successful. So they're going to find more and more ways to try to cause you problems. And I just hate for people to wait until something bad has happened and they lose $5,000, they lose $50,000, right? They lose a chunk of money and then they go, man, I should have gotten some help, right? So
do it before it's too late, right?
Exactly. It's a bit like insurance, right? Don't wait until something happens and then wish you had insurance. But in this case, like I said, we can give you a $1,500 solution. But if it's not us, then go to somebody else you know that knows security well and just get yourself in a better position. Like, just don't wait for something bad to happen before you go, oh, this is real.
Well, Scott, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today and giving us some good words of wisdom around this topic that is kind of fuzzy for a lot of people in rural America. And we're going to be putting in the show notes the link to your website and what you guys do. That way, anyone listening to this that wants to find out more can do that. And again, thanks, Scott, so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. I mean, thank you for exposing this and having this be a topic. And I hope we help somebody today.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks once again for listening to this week's episode of the AgCulture Podcast. If you got value out of today's episode, please subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform that you're listening to this on, and share it with somebody else that you know if you think they can gain value from hearing about cybersecurity. Now, as always, thanks for tuning in. I'm Paul Windemaller, and we will see you next week for another exciting episode of the AgCulture Podcast.